Hi everyone. So my name is Anna, and this is my co-founder Liz. We're from Pure Growth, which is one of the companies organizing this event. We are a sustainability consulting company, and we've just launched a set of guides on how companies can do sustainability and take the first steps. So we're very excited to hear from these speakers who are actually doing sustainability here today.
Great, so to get started, throughout the presentations as well as in the feedback in the workshops, this issue of how to incentivize data sharing. Wait, can everybody hear? Can you guys hear in the back? Okay, great. The issue of how to incentivize data sharing, especially in these complex global systems where companies have IP issues to worry about, that's an issue that's come up again and again throughout the presentations. So the first questions, do you think the definition of what sensitive data means in the circular world needs to change? Do you think that, touching on these cultural issues that Carolina mentioned, and then relatedly, do you think there are any kinds of specific technologies that can help build trust and facilitate the data sharing? Let's get started.
So want to start? Or do I start?
You can start.
Whoever wants to start, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not a specialist in data privacy issues, but when it comes to kind of what is sensitive, that was actually my question. What I was sending to in your facilitation, that what is the definition of sensitive? Because it's really a hard definition. It's really tied to culture and human minds. But considering the amount of data we are today having there somewhere, I think that the definition of sensitive will definitely be changed, and it might actually be that we don't need to change it. We just need to understand more precisely that how people actually feel about sensitive information, because that's really individual. But yeah. What was that? The second point?
And then are there any specific technologies that you think can help facilitate trust?
It's a good, digitalization can serve as a technology, but just as I kind of, we were discussing before my presentation, was that I think that the technology cannot facilitate the trust. It's still human beings who are trying the technology to facilitate the trust. And I think that also we have different technological and digital solutions. They are just the tools to facilitate the trust, and the human beings still, I'm saying it here within the people who are just working around digitalization, it's still human beings who are facilitating the trust in the end, today still.
So my background is that I am an engineer, and it's always tempting to think that you can solve all the world's problems with technology, but I completely agree with Carolina that the main thing, if we want to have the infrastructure working, you actually do need to have people's mindset also changing. That so first of all, if it's about the sensibility of data. So, you don't always need to share everything with everyone. I mean, if we're talking about ecosystems of data, so there can be several different layers and rules within those. How do you share data? So that's a thing that should be developed in a kind of multi-layer, multifaceted way. And the same goes for individuals. So it's not at all so that everything that's about me has to be always identifiable back to me. So there are different mechanisms of anonymizing and things like that. So that's another thing. So when we collect data, so we can do a lot by also kind of helping to build the trust with the technology and this mindset change. But in the end, so kind of no matter whether we use blockchains to do it or any technology, so the real thing that needs to work are the incentives for organizations and the incentives for individuals to be involved. Without that, nothing will work.
Well, thank you so much for breaking the ice, Carolina. It's a delicate topic. And I tend to be quite brutal. I don't believe on raising sensitivity or sensibility of people on these matters. We all, well, some of us, including myself, we love to share our kid pictures on the Facebook, and yeah, I know that there's people that's much more conservative with these things. I'm quite open. It's connected probably with some disorder with ego. We like to expose ourselves for free. So I would suggest to take a much different approach. So be coherent with that human nature and say, well, maybe you don't care. Usually you don't care too much about those things. But what if I'm telling you that you're actually producing electricity and you're giving it for free to somebody who is then selling it for a quite an expensive price? Because that's what's happening with our data.
Mm.
So to people who is not so careful like me with those things, if you tell to me that, well, there is a way that you can start making money directly to your bank account by stop selling your data for free. And if it's very simple, because I don't know anything about technology and I don't want, I hear all these things every time, but who cares? I'm not so important and everybody's doing it. And then, of course, that when everybody can see your naked pictures, then you're in trouble, but that happens afterwards. So how to create a reaction before you reach to that terrible point, to me, would be with a clear financial incentive. The problem is that that doesn't exist right now. And what's even worse, we're about to, all of us, individuals and companies, we're about to start creating a massive amount of information. I'm not talking about the pictures of your cat and your baby on Facebook, but your wearables, all your IoT connected devices from home, your car, everything is producing information that, I mean, it doesn't make me feel any special if I post on Facebook what my thermometer at the outside of my home is measuring, but it turns out that that information has value for somebody, especially when they connect it with my very public Facebook profile. So that creates an opportunity that people doesn't have to change their own already very promiscuous habits on social media, and they can start making profit, and that could create a business incentive also for new businesses as an alternative to Facebooks and Google that they are patronizing everybody on and selling your electricity that are not even asking so much. So that's my take, that just to make it, then later on we might get to higher visions, but I think first we need to address it that way.
Well, the other side, exactly. Well, the other side of this is that, well, do we have the right measurement sticks anyway on kind of what is value of data, and then you know, the current system of money, does that actually transfer to the data economy in the way that it should, and again, well, maybe the circularity side, perhaps it can be one of the kind of the change agents to also to start rethinking also, so what is value of data in any different, you know, in any particular context. But what you just said, I think, goes all the way back there, sort of, you know, how do we give the value of data, both individual data and organizational data? Mm. Where do you find the yardstick for that?
Yeah.
This actually goes well right into our next question. So, because we have this massive amounts of data coming in, what do you think are the kind of key technologies or key ways that we can unlock the value in the data, and how are we going to actually measure the value of it for circular economy?
Wow, that I was thinking, do I start to write a book here, or how to answer? I think that if you find a question to that you will really make $1 million in a day. And I actually think that your question is already reflecting the kind of complexity that how to add value in a circular economy and with which technologies. Because I think that we have kind of pieces in the puzzle in place. We have excellent examples like yours actually. So we have really good examples that how you can do things. Mm-hmm. But what will be the system level change, and how do those kind of pieces fit into that system level puzzle is still a question mark. And when you think about the kind of added value in the future, it's still unclear. Just one question, so
yeah,
how
yeah.
do you...
Please go ahead.
Comment. So should I take a mic or not?
Can you...
Okay. So I'm Pekka Nikander of Aalto University, and I think one potential key aspect here is just to change our thinking. So if we think about money, like Marco referred to a little bit, it's an accounting system today. So money itself doesn't have any value. It's just a measure of value. It's a measure of value that the economists call utility, which is very ill-defined. But it mainly measures efficiency in some very weird sense. But for example, it doesn't measure the efficiency of the circularity of the things. So I think that we need new accounting systems, basically. So new ways of measuring values. And I say values, not value, because I think there are multiple values. And once we start to value those other accounting systems as much as we do value the accounting system called money, then we may have a key to some change.
Sorry, may I comment on this?
Sure.
I'm Vladimir Kuparinen, startupper. So I have read recently about the accounting system that already exists, what you are thinking of. It's called combination of intrinsic and extrinsic values, because fiat money is extrinsic values like oil and banknotes, and intrinsic values are like circularity or functioning of our society. So the system already is under development. So I hope we can find the way. Thank you.
Well, just a quick comment that then, on the other hand, to get these things off the ground, so starting, for example, with inefficiencies, just like we heard with cargo tech, that there is a clear business need to do this because it's hugely inefficient the way it's done now, and then combining that with the other measurements, take off, for example, CO2 offsetting or whatever it is, that we can, show both at the same time. So I think that realistically is the way to get going.
Well, my comment on your comments, both your comments, I think that it's good to have a vision of the new accounting system or where we want to get. Then the big challenge is always to build the incentives and the strategy to make a transition. Because otherwise it's a little bit like, yeah, this planet is wasted, let's find a better one, but then how we get there. So I think that the mindset or what was on my mental backstage when I was trying to find what's the carrot to make people be more sensitive about the data, and let's try with money, because that seems that we react to money, is connected to that. So how can we hack the mindset, how can we hack the market, how can we hack the CFO to say, okay, actually, I'm not going to talk about circularity, I'm not going to talk about sustainability, I'm not going to talk about anything. What's your language? Your language is money. Your language is whatever accounting system you're already using. Okay, I will connect it to that. So if you embrace these practices, these are your benefits day one. And I will prove you with a logic argument. So it's even above market research, it's just a flat fact. If we can build it that way, then I believe that we could have a chance. And still, there is a lot of superpowers and dark hands playing against us, as always. But then it might work. And then eventually we will get to the ideal new accounting system. I really think it can happen. It has been always changing. Everything has changed in the last 2,000 years. So why would stop? Let's try to make a change in the direction where we're still alive.
So before we open it up to the rest of the audience, did you have one more? Okay, for questions, we want to ask each of you, what advice would you give to companies looking to start on the digitally circular journey?
I think that I must admit that this is not my advice, but this is really a good advice. I have heard sometimes kind of circularity and digitalization. I think it's today a lot of about startups, to be honest, and the startups have a great potential in circular economy and digitalization. And the digitalization or software companies have also a great potential there. But I think that when it comes to kind of from the commercial perspective, sorry, I really need to talk about money here as well, is that if you wanna kind of increase your competitiveness in a kind of circular economy and digitalization, I think that the key is that whether the digital companies find the ways how to work like the industries, or do the industries win in digitalization before that happens. I think that's something which is actually good to keep in mind, that the winner in this kind of circular economic competition is the one who understands this difference first, that do the industries, we really old traditional industries, understand what the digitalization means, or do the digital companies understand how the industry works, and which one is faster will win the game also in the circular economy.
Yeah.
Well, from startup entrepreneur point of view, it's a hell of a tough job to start your own business. So my first piece of advice is that to make sure that you really want to do it, and then don't be frustrated, because frustration is just a blinking light that is telling you that there is something wrong with your data, with your pitch, with your strategy. And also that it's many times, unless you are in a very high level position in your network, extremely high, like you are a former CEO of a Virgin Airlines and now you want to start a new company, all the normal regular human beings, you need to be validated always for every gateway by somebody who is higher than you. So you need to keep your pitch very down to earth, and you need to be very aware that you need those constant validations. If you don't get those, probably you won't make it through. So that's my little piece of advice.
Well, I guess, or my advice, if no matter whether you are a startup or a corporate or an NGO or a concerned citizen, so which human behavior would you like to influence and change? Why and how? I think that's where I start.
Thank you, everyone. So now we'll open it up for questions. So we'll pass around the mic, and you can also tweet in your questions at #DigitallyCircular.
Yep. There's a question in the back there.
Thank you. I'm Anna Kolar. My question goes to, the economy has transferred from the times we would buy an electronics that would last for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, to times when we buy an electronics and we know that after 5 years we have to throw it away because it doesn't function. So it seems that the economical thinking has changed in terms of we want more people to consume more, to make more money, because we do have technologies where we can make a phone that will last 10 years, but we don't make it. Also, my recent experience had been with the iPad mini that has refused to update the iOS. Said, well, we cannot update to a new version of iOS. And I'm thinking, well, why not? It's a perfect piece of technology. It's still working after 5 years. It's wonderful, but I cannot update to the new software. So should we start thinking also in a way that some regulations should change, that we should say, well, if you build a car, this car has to function for 10 years, otherwise you cannot put it in the market. If you build a phone, this phone has to function for 5 years or 10 years, otherwise you can't bring it to the market. It seems that there was this greed for the more profits is now running us into, all of us, into the trash bin with all of these equipments that we don't even have a chance to recycle. It's just impossible. So, any thoughts in the direction whether we could try to push towards changing the regulations towards what's the quality of the product that has to be in order to be able to put on the market?
Well, I guess guess it goes for me. Yeah, I think that the first thing is also, just like as entrepreneurs, dealing with frustration is key. I think as consumers and inhabitants of the planet, first of all, we need to deal with our own frustration as consumers. If we take just a step back, if we zoom out on a whole different industries, including electronics, that have been behaving over the last 100 years or 2,000 years, it's speeding up, but it's always the same loop. So every now and then, there is a certain amount of technologies that they converge, they are all mature enough, and then ta-da, there is something that combines all those things together, plus whatever 10% of additional innovation on top. Sometimes the innovation is the receipt itself, or it's combined. And then there is a gold fever to catch up with that new opportunity. Then after 5, 10, 15 years, for economically driven reasons, the things they become standardized. And then there's when finally is when the opportunities to just the dust settles down, and then there's an opportunity to create standardized, better experiences. To say, okay, we have been throwing away things like crazy for 10 years because there was a need for new specs every year. But what are we seeing in the last 3 years? Okay, people is no longer paying attention how many megapixels, how many RAM, how many this and that. It's a very well-known period on the curve that it's about the commoditization of the technology. And then is when you can jump in and produce something new. I don't believe it has to be done through regulations, and not just because as an entrepreneur I'm a crazy believer on unregulated stuff. I moved into Finland to pay taxes because I believe in the welfare. I'm not exactly that kind of guy. But I don't believe that it's the right incentive. The incentive is the opportunity that arises when the supply chain is standardizing for cost-driven reasons, and then somebody can create something. Then it's about to having the incentives, the financial instruments, and raising the awareness among the consumers, investments, and everything that, hey, you're having patronized, you have force-feed it with McDonald's, but now it turns out there is another alternative. Sorry for McDonald's, I eat there every now and then, sorry. But yeah, then you can inform the people and the investors and the retailers and everybody that there is a different way, why you are supporting those different ways to come to the market. Then if you are really truly producing something new, if everybody has recovered from the hangover of the gold rush fever, then they will buy your thing. If they don't buy your thing, if they don't use it, then we are probably having a much bigger problem sitting probably on our culture, and we are probably all doomed and we are going to die, so we don't have to worry.
Do you have any comments?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't have that much more.
Well, I think it's an excellent question that can some incentives be made. I don't think that I'm a little bit the same opinion that just regulating that every product should be on the market for at least 10 years. Well, that probably would not be the right way to do it. But other incentives so build infrastructure and sort of business reasons why to make things more sustainable, also from the point of view of not having to replace every so often. So absolutely that would be good.
Okay, take one more question and then
Or maybe again a comment. So changing the business model often helps. We tried recently exactly on this. We had a startup company for having a computer as a service or a cell phone as a service as well. And there basically the value chain changes so that if you are having a cell phone as a service, actually it's the hardware company who has the incentive to make it to last as long as possible. And this is just an example on how within the current economic system you can sometimes change the situation by having a new business model.
Very good point, and product as a service has been discussed quite a bit also in the EPC work, and that is one way to do this. So kind of really rethink even with very, very kind of traditional products, just rethink what if this would be offered to the market, not as a product that you have to buy every now and then, every other year, but as a service provided by the company. So, and that can be a big change.
Can I comment on that one? We still have time? I totally agree. I think that there is one case that it didn't make it big on the headlines, although that somebody wrote a little bit about it. It's basically when Apple announced the iPhone 6s, the second version of the iPhone 6, there was something changed inside the device, and it was almost unnoticed. And it's basically that they added the waterproofness of the product, but that was before they start selling iPhones as waterproof. That happened in the 7th generation. So then the question would be, okay, why these guys who make a big noise of every single small improvement they make the product better, but they didn't say anything about it. You can check the keynote, it's not there. And you can say, well, it may be because of warranty reasons, because that improvement was not super waterproof. So maybe they were not so certain, but then still, why to make it? If you're not going to announce it, why to bother? You wait until it's really waterproof, and then you put it there, and then you sell it. So what all the things were happening in that presentation is that, and what all the things were happening in the market in that year, just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, is that the smartphone market was already showing signs of slowing down because it's becoming saturated, and now the companies, they need to be creative on how to keep selling things. The book of rules start to change. So in that very same presentation, it was the first time that Apple started to offer renting of their iPhones directly. So they jumped into hardware as a service, and they saw that there was a need to make the product more resilient because it's their responsibility. So it's also connected a little bit with the previous comment that those things in the end, just to have a little bit of hope, they end up happening. There is something in the accounting system we have that it's pretty loosey, but at the end, sometimes too late, but better than never, they react to saturation, and then they try to find better ways, but not before there is a financial reason for it, which is a little bit sad part of it.
Can I also have a short comment?
I also need to comment. So coming back to that regulatory question, that's a good and valid question. But then first of all, if we consider what do most of the citizens want today, they want to have mortgage with cheaper price continuously. And the brands and the mode is changing all the time. So basically the consumer habits have just increased in a way and changed in a way that I'm not that sure whether it's actually work to have a kind of regulation that some product needs to last like for 10 years as such. Rather, what I would like to consider is actually the warranty questions, which is really, really important. If you want to make, for example, spare parts kind of reused, the warranty question is actually a major blocker for that today. And then secondly is the recyclability and reusability of the individual parts of a product, so that you really kind of consider that what are the materials you are using for the product, so that how do you end use the product and take it back, rather than regulate the kind of durability or existence of a product. Because to be honest, with this kind of habits we are having today to buy more and more, it's really a long-term solution to try to change the culture, and that way to kind of make incentives for a better quality product. I think it's better to take a look at the business and consider the business models, the warranties, and kind of existing regulation to make that more flexible, to enable the business creativeness.
Thank you. So thank you very much for our panelists. Hopefully the discussion continues after the presentations, and I think Michael still has, we have one more interactive portion for everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. We need to switch off the microphones. So just a quick comment, because speaking about business models, innovation, and as a service models, we had, I think it was last time, here a startup that offered oil as a service in an industrial context. So if you're interested in that, you can find the recordings of the presentations in the Digitally Circular YouTube channel. And there's also a good example of Goodyear, who actually offers tires as a service to their customers. So I think it's back to the point that startups and new companies will find new ways of offering products, and they will do it faster in many cases than traditional companies, if traditional companies, industries are not fast in inventing these models, inventing these new ways of operating themselves.